Chapter 3. 1. An incandescent Ohio sky fanned out into oblivion. Baby blue and sprawling, it swallowed the horizon. Tatters of clouds floated by on nothing, casting dim shadows that rolled over earth-toned hills speckled with quiet, unassuming houses. Tiny black sparrows scattered into a frenzy when a groaning, disheveled Toyota Camry whisked past at better than 50 miles an hour. It skimmed atop a newly paved road that curled and unwound itself into suburbia like an asphalt snake. Rainbow bears lined up together in a careless row behind a dusty back windshield that was reflecting a brilliant, January sun. Bernie Sanders stickers peppered its gray hind end underneath. "Fight War, Not Wars" was painted in chipped red flecks beside the car's smoking hole of exhaust pipe. Nate Tillerson sat astride a ketchup-stained passenger seat, looking out at scenery that raced by in whispering gasps. He was dazed and sleepy. The night before haunted him like throbs of raucous sound bites inside his tired brain. He could almost feel the neurological fumes leaking out of his skull. A smothering hangover jabbed into his intestines each time the Camry rocked on a dip in the road or rattled over a pothole. He swallowed a mouthful of soured saliva that had worked its way up his throat and grimaced, reflexively. "You all right over there, Captain Spanks-a-Lot?" the Camry's ephebic pilot asked, with snide concern. Nate nodded at the driver who should have had the same hangover and tried on a feeble smile. Actually, he should have been even worse off than Nate, but Dennis Barrington showed no visible signs of physiological disquiet. He faced forward, with one bony hand slumped over his steering wheel, and a sultry grin fixed upon his handsome face. Nate watched the outside world scroll by on his dark sunglasses. Dennis plucked a fat white joint from the back of his ear with the unconscious grace of a street magician, and set it ablaze against a practiced flick of his Zippo lighter. It billowed bright orange, and a flame reached out for the mess of bangs that were drooping from the backward Ohio State ball cap he was wearing. He drew on it deeply, and the flame winked out. A ragged cherry smoldered unevenly in its wake. The prickled aroma of pot found Nate's sensitive nose, and he expelled a wavering sneeze. Dennis sized him up, his cheeks bulging like an anthropomorphic choo-choo engine. The placid grin that had been resting on his face melted into a giant cheese. He snorted curls of smoke from his nostrils before coughing a storm cloud into Nate's face. "Jesus, Tillerson," he managed through stuttering laughter, "I had about 10 more beers after you passed out last night in front of everybody. It's not that fucking early, bro. What the hell's your deal?" Nate smiled and took the little white torch from Dennis's outstretched hand. He sipped 2 short puffs and held it in as long as he could. "You're a fucking alien, bro," he said, passing it back to Dennis. "Not human." Dennis held up his hand in a mock Star Trek gesture. "Take me to your liquor," he commanded, in his best, cliché extraterrestrial voice. Nate nodded, deferentially. "When we get to my uncle's house," Dennis said, "I'll pour you a thimble of the cheap whiskey he keeps on hand, hair of the dog and balls of the bull. It'll put some color back into your face. How the hell you ever expect to get laid, anyway, if you keep passing out when everyone divides into teams? You gotta slow down, baby. We got 2 more years and then it's off to the McFascist hacienda we go. And then our cocks and our wallets are all on their own." Nate shook his head. "Right on, Dennis McDowner," he said. "I guess it's a good thing for me that college isn't really my end game, then. My dad says if I can hold on to AC, he might be able to get me through the back door as a legal assistant. After that, I work my way up, take the bar, make the right connections, fuck your mom, and then I become a partner." "And you believe him?" Dennis choked. "You're fucked in the head, Tillerson. The bone has been picked clean, already. Haven't you heard? It doesn't work like that anymore. Did you know, if you look real close up on a baby boomer when they smile, you can see the meat rotting between their teeth? There's nothing out there for me and you. The great economic Old West awaits, where fucking dollar bills blow around like tumbleweeds. Get your juicy piece of that ass now or never, and then enjoy it while it lasts. And besides, my mom told me you fuck like a dizzy hamster. Nate measured him seriously for a beat, and then they both brayed laughter with symbiotic uniformity. Dennis sucked on the joint he was holding and wiped his leaking eyes with the back of a hand. Everybody thinks this Trump shit is all a joke, he said, passing the goods back to Nate, but just watch. They'll put him in there. And no one will see it coming, either. It's the insatiable idea of patriotic spite. When it happens, whatever fighting chance you or I had at building something to give to our grandkids is Deniso. That motherfucker is like the zombie that crawled out of the pet cemetery after white people buried the 1970s in it. He popped open the console that divided him and Nate, grabbed a CD smeared with thumbprints, and fed it into the radio slit. It uttered a mechanized titter, and then the sleazy, snarling riffs of Danzig's Dirty Black Summer swelled into existence. Good music is about the only relic the fucking boomers left us to work with. Dennis called to him through the decibelic waves of electric guitar. Rock and roll is dead. 2. A tall, heavy-set man ostensibly in his 60s, stood with watchful stillness at the apron of a slick black driveway. If he hadn't moved for a moment to adjust a red ball cap that was draping his forehead, he might have been mistaken for a department store mannequin. He measured Nate with cursory interest as Dennis's Camry rocked over the curb with effort. Glenn Danzig screamed at all three of them from the tremoring speakers in the back seat. Dennis drew on the joint one last time. The cherry ember devoured what little paper remained, and he flicked it into the ashtray before it could singe his fingers. He killed the engine and smiled at the ball cap man with a million watts as the window beside him slithered down into the door. Dennis popped his head out of the car. You just can't find good help anymore these days, am I right? He called to the big man, cutting through the gelatinous silence that was pressing against Nate's temples, in the afterglow of the Camry's musical onslaught. Where the hell you been? The man said without moving. It's 9:47, Dennis. We're not on Central Stoner time. Oh Christ, that's right, Dennis said with satirical contemplation, we're in your zone now. The lone zone, right? What the hell was I thinking? We're on Uncle Eddie time and Uncle Eddie's dime. I've never forgotten that little limerick. It's a gem, that one. Got me through quite a few shifts at McDonald's and Friends, at least. I'd say it's about the only brainwashing I got as a kid that ever came in handy. He flashed the man another twinkling smile. Uncle Eddie shifted his gaze onto Nate, scanning him for anything worthwhile. It made him feel small and young in the passenger seat. He adjusted himself with businesslike acuity. A teardrop of sweat slid down the crack of his ass, tickling his balls. Well, Uncle Eddie allowed, mercifully averting his eyes from Nate, I hope you two are worth $8 an hour. Word on the street is, you kids don't want to work for anything anymore. I was in my 20s, once. And I was an asshole too. But I did work for all I got. Dennis nodded sincerely, as if he had just been bestowed upon by some bit of talismanic, ancestral wisdom for the very first time. Uncle Eddie shrugged. I'm just letting you know ahead of time. I ain't made of cash. Can't afford to watch you two get high all day and talk philosophy. Dennis opened the Camry's door. He removed his shades and unfolded himself to meet Uncle Eddie face to face. A passing resemblance was hinted, discreetly, in their profiles. It was in the eyes something alive and haunted. Captain Spanks-a-Lot and I are here to roll our sleeves up and make some sweat, Dennis said. Don't worry about that. And besides, you think I'm doing this shit for money? No, sir. And who needs it when everything is handed to you anyway, right? I mean, honestly, we were just kinda expecting an invitation to poker night or something, that's all. Thought you could show me a thing or two about playing your hand close to the chest. I mean, I can kick the shit out of this guy. Dennis cocked a thumb down at Nate. But he thinks a Full House is a shitty show from the 90s. You know how nice guys are. And I even brought my bicycle deck in case we get done ahead of schedule. It'd be quite an honor to christen the rebirth of your garage. And I gotta step my game up. Uncle Eddie remained frozen in spite of Dennis Barrington's trademark charm, but Nate thought he saw an inconspicuous grin flicker at the corners of the burly man's mouth. He clapped Dennis on the shoulder and let out a defeated sigh, his posture finally giving way. "I'll see what I can do," he said. And just like that, the precarious intensity had evaporated. Uncle Eddie led the way inside, providing an unceremonious tour of the living room and kitchen before corralling them off to the garage. It turned out that they would, in fact, get done ahead of schedule way ahead. After about 20 or so bags of garbage had been carried out to the street along with a few miscellaneous engine parts, an old mattress, and a fucking bench that weighed more than a casket with a body inside of it, the rest was cake. Dennis swept and Nate Windexed the windows. Uncle Eddie had commented at one point that, for a couple of millennials, they sure were busting ass. He even hit the joint a few times in celebration, after Dennis rolled another one up. They had eventually formed a campfire circle around the forest green poker table, laughing, getting really high, and playfully arguing about politics. Uncle Eddie had actually had a moment of uncharacteristic self-awareness when he admitted that he knew Donald Trump wasn't really ever going to be elected president. He had given them a well-hey schmuck can hope look of conceit, his red eyes squinted from the pot and streaming with tears. They had all had a good laugh at that one. There was some bickering, but nothing too serious, mostly just light-hearted scuffles about the sacrosanct humanity of universal health care and what makes an honest democracy. That was about it. The conversation had behaved itself, rather improbably. Except, there was one argument that Nate couldn't seem to get off of his mind. It had been bizarre and out of tune, somehow. The whole thing had made him edgy with confusion. Even the beers and the Xbox he and Dennis shared, when they got back to their little dorm room efficiency, hadn't been enough to lift the unease completely. It kept gnawing at him, superimposing itself over every other experience like an old television screen that had been left on the same picture for too long. It wasn't how heated things had gotten that was the problem, though. What bothered Nate was how silly and, frankly, stupid of an argument it was. Senseless, even. This one hadn't been about politics at all. This one was about pizza, a stupid fucking pizza. Everything had gone on just fine until Dennis had tried to order Domino's, even though they had both been promised a complimentary meal for their labor. Uncle Eddie had stopped him, suddenly, saying something about a free one that was due to him thanks to some bullshit that had happened the night before. It was something about him almost burning his house down. When Dennis asked Uncle Eddie for the phone number, after reluctantly hanging up on the Domino's guy, he said he couldn't remember it, but it was in his Yellow Pages book, whatever the fuck that was. Uncle Eddie had started to go back inside the house to get it, but Dennis told him not to worry about it, and to just give him the name of the place. He told Dennis he couldn't remember, but it was something that started with AC. Dennis had named off the two places he knew of that had that letter in it, but Uncle Eddie had shaken his head at him, defiantly, both times. Eventually, after getting nowhere with that plan of attack, Uncle Eddie had gone into the house anyway. He popped back into the door frame a few minutes later, and told Dennis that the name of the place was Crowley's. Nate still had trouble swallowing it, but that's what he had said. When Dennis realized Uncle Eddie was actually serious about such an off-the-wall story, and not just fucking around with them, he had insisted Uncle Eddie provide him with details if he expected anybody to listen to another word of what he was saying. And that was the real problem, wasn't it? Uncle Eddie had been as serious as lung cancer about the whole thing. It had to be a joke, but that didn't make any sense, either, not at all. And he had really seemed pissed off that Dennis didn't believe him. He puffed his chest out like an aggrieved drunk in a bar fight, and planted his fist down onto the poker table hard enough to topple the stack of bicycle cards. Then he doubled down, even going as far as profiling the delivery driver that had come to his house, tall, lanky kid in his 20s with long blondish hair. And he had mentioned a broken front tooth, a beat-up silver car, and some tattoo written in Latin. It had almost sounded like he was talking about Noah Crowley, but that was impossible. Dennis had dialed the number just to show Uncle Eddie that he had to have mistaken, somehow. And when the operator picked up and told them all that she was sorry, but the number they were trying to reach had been disconnected, Uncle Eddie had gotten even more riled up. He said something about business etiquette and driving all the way the fuck back up there. That had been the end of it. Dennis had hung up, called Domino's again, and then they had all eventually eaten and moved on from the whole Erie business. Except for Nate, not really. But, of course, who could have blamed him?